That's not what the women's movement was about. The women's movement was about women securing economic independence, not about men losing it. That's not attractive.
You've got 2 sons, right?
3.
3 sons, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess this kind of brings us to the penultimate point, which is, if you were sitting down with all 3 of your sons, which you might have done already, and they said to you, Dad, listen, what does it mean to be a man in the modern world? What should I do? Should I hold the door open? Should I don't know, go to the gym? Should I pursue a high-flying, bread-winning job? What does it mean to be a man? What advice would you give them about being a man in the modern world? Honestly, the advice that would set them up to be successful in their romantic relationships and in the world and in their mind.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in some ways, I think the fact that conversation might almost be a sign of failure, not just individually, but more socially, because I really believe that people believe their eyes before they believe their ears. And so what I would really hope is that I've been showing, not telling. That it's not a curriculum. It's not a here's the 4-point plan for modern masculinity based on my years of research. It's more like, well, you've seen how I am. You've seen how I am with your mum. You've seen how I've worked. You've seen how I raised you. You've seen how I interact with people. There's this lovely phrase from a philosopher, is in the thick of daily life. Like, how are you in the thick of daily life? You've seen me help that person. You've seen me, like, they tease me with this, I pick up the Lime scooters all the time, right? Because someone's going to trip over them, right? You've seen how I've reacted, right? And I haven't done that kind of saying, oh, this is masculinity, but you've seen me do certain things that you've just kind of imbued along the way. So that sounds like a cop-out, but I won't cop out completely, because I think I would say, look, first of all, recognize that there are on average differences, right? So there are going to be things that you're going to be inclined towards or want to do that are just different, right? There's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with some of these impulses and instincts that you've got, right? Of course, you want complete gender equality. And so you're going to look for partners who are going to give you that as well. And above all, be for others. Serve. And so the first 2, I'd open the door, for sure. Yeah. What was the second one? I can't remember. But you said, open the door.
It's about career, and it's about going to the gym.
Go to the gym, sure. I mean, actually, all the evidence about being physically healthy is important. But then kind of get a high-earning job. I wouldn't say that. I would say find work that, yes, will pay. Don't be naive about that. But it's much more important that you're passionate about your work. You'll be much more attractive to someone if you're passionate. We're only here once, for God's sake. And so the idea that you're going to, that someone's attracted to someone who like just kind of into their work just because it makes a bunch of that's not sexy. It doesn't matter what the paycheck is, right? What's sexy is passion and agency and, verve, mojo, whatever. So absolutely, I would advise all of that. I actually think it's kind of weird, back to the dating thing, is that in some way, I think it captures a lot of our conversation though, which is that I've tried to raise them in a way that would give them the courage to ask a girl out, the grace to accept no for an answer, and then the responsibility to make sure that either way she gets home safely. So what I've got in there is a little bit of agency, a little bit of leaning in, a little bit of taking a risk. It's a risk to ask someone out, right? And I think risk taking is on average a bit more masculine. That's secondly, you have no sense of entitlement about that. And if you've read it wrong or whatever, and she's like, no, thank you. Like, you are totally cool with that, right? Incredibly. But then thirdly, either way, like, there is a responsibility to make sure people are kind of safe. And if you're in a position where you're a little bit stronger and able to do that, great. And in fact, I had a rule with my kids that they had a curfew, but actually if they broke the curfew because they were getting someone home safely, they got an exemption from that. And there was one night when my sons came home and I was waiting for him, and it was 30 minutes after curfew, pouring with rain. He came home, drowned rat, and he'd walked a girl home. Got her home safely. It's like, great. Now, I like to think that sort of formulation is capturing some stuff that is a bit more inherently masculine, but in a world where there's no entitlement, there's no sense of inequality. And I don't think that's a horrible formula. And generally speaking, I've kind of found a lot of men and women like, yes, actually, I would quite like you. It's a covered garage or whatever. I would actually quite like to make sure that I get to my car safely or kind of whatever. And I don't think that's patriarchy. I think that's good manners and responsibility. What that doesn't mean is that, and you do it for your boss, you do it for somebody else. It doesn't mean that there's any going back to a world where that gave you some sort of extra power in the labor market or something like that. So I think it's really difficult, honestly, right now to get this right. But I think too many people are also treading on eggshells a little bit too.
Yeah.
Like they do, rather than run the risk of doing something wrong, they do nothing. And that's the worst of all worlds because we don't learn.
But also those kids are going to fall into the hands of others in terms of their influence. So they're going to learn how to be a man from TikTok or Twitter. And you never know which algorithm's going to sweep them away.
One thing we can be pretty sure of is that, with some exceptions, you're not going to learn how to be a man from social media or online. You're going to learn it from your dad, your neighbor, your brother, your teacher, your coach. The best antidote to some of the reactionary content that some young men are encountering online now isn't other online content, much though, of course, we're all producing more online content. It's actually a real live man in your life. It's flesh and blood. And I think that's so much more powerful. I think that my son as a teacher in front of a classroom of boys is going to be a much more powerful antidote to those reactionary figures that they might see online than somebody else online. That's how we win. We win in real life, not online.
I mean, there's kind of two adjacent points here. The first is your son is going into a profession that is increasingly depleting in men.
Yeah.
Because what's it, like 20% or